Welcome to another episode of the Swamp247 Podcast. I am your host, Graham Hall, joined today by the fantastic Blake Alderman, and we are going to talk about Florida's recruiting efforts as they extend to this upcoming contest, Saturday's 3:30 p.m. kickoff with Texas A&M. We've discussed that there are some familiar names on the opposing sideline, from Scooby Williams and Jaden Hill to coaches Sean Spencer and Jay Bateman. Although there is a lot of unknowns, certainly, with this Texas A&M team. A new offensive system, Mike Elko making his first road trip with the Aggies this season. The Aggies haven't won an SEC away game since 2021, so certainly they're looking to break this streak. And a lot of unpredictable factors as well, from the health of Connor Wigman to several other players inside their defense. Tyreek Chappell as well. Scooby Williams questionable. A lot that we're following over there at Swamp247. But today we are going to talk about what the Gators are doing behind the scenes with their recruiting efforts as it extends to the future. If you follow recruiting intently, which I know so many of you do out there, you saw some notable news less than a week ago as Javion Hilson backed off a pledge to Florida State, and now he is going to be in Gainesville for this upcoming contest, as Florida has made it clear to him that they see him as a high priority target. Blake, what have you heard regarding Hilson, and where do the Gators really stand right now in his recruitment?
Yeah, I think that as far as just where Florida stands, I think as of today, just backing off the commitment just this past Sunday, Hilson saying that he's planning to take things all the way out to December, closer to the early signing period. So there's a lot that could change here. I mean, this is a guy that has been committed to Alabama. Granted, a Nick Saban retirement caused him to flip that commitment to Florida State. But nonetheless, you've got a guy that's been committed twice. He's opened it up twice. He's been committed twice. So you never know if a timeline could change. He's a guy that, even in the summer, whenever he was committed to Florida State, took some official visits and went to Florida, went to Texas, and then went to UCF. So visits Florida that first OV weekend. Comes out of that saying that Florida was really close, second, right there behind Florida State. Turns around and goes to Texas the next weekend. Well, Texas is now a close second. So you've got a guy that has shown he can make some rash decisions. He's got a very fluid recruitment, and now you've got a guy that is all that being said is saying he's going to take his time. So we'll see how things go there. So, but we have to take his word as value. So there's a lot of things that could change, but I think as of right now, I'd probably lean Texas, or at least I'm watching Texas as of now. They've done a really good job with him, doing a really good job recruiting in the state of Florida, playing really well, SEC conference now to sell on the recruiting trail. So I think that Texas, who already has a really good class, is the one that I'm probably watching right now. But he's going to take some visits this fall. Florida's going to get him on campus this weekend. And it's a guy that Florida never stopped recruiting. Even out of the summer, like I said, he took those official visits. Ended off his June with an official visit to Florida State, came out of that visit and said, my recruitment shut down. I appreciate all the other schools, blah, 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 blah. But Florida had still been in touch with him. Mike Peterson has been making him a priority. And I think it was sometime around the spring, even talking to him, that I wrote up something on him after speaking with him. He had taken, I think, an unofficial visit to Florida, and he mentioned that Florida's staff had already been recruiting him, but he noticed a big uptick. Mike Peterson calling almost every day. Lewis McLeod, an off-field guy there at Florida, had been in touch every day. Jeremy Patterson, another off-field guy, in touch every day. He'd been in touch with Gerald Chapman some too. That's kind of typical with edge guys. Florida will usually have, obviously, Mike Peterson. Gerald Chapman will get in there some. Austin Armstrong. So it was a large cast. Billy Napier's even been involved in this recruitment. And I think something that, I don't know if it's a big appeal in the sense to where, like, I think that if Hilson were to pick Florida, it would be because of this, but I do think it's a positive, just the fact that Florida's had guys like Chauncey Gardner. They've had guys like Juwan Taylor that have come out of Cocoa, played really well there, got drafted in the NFL, still playing right now in the league. So Cocoa is one of those teams. It's really high school, close-knit type of community. So I think that has a little bit of sway, I guess, or at least it's an interest point for him. So we'll see. It's a guy that is going to be a high priority recruit for a lot of schools. There could even be some schools that we're not talking about right now that are at least on my radar to keep an eye on him. You have a guy that's like a top 50 fringe 5-star type of guy at a premier position like an edge rusher that everybody needs in the entire country. You're going to have – your phone's going to be ringing. So I'm interested to see his recruitment play out. I don't know that I would lean towards Florida right now for him. I think that he's kind of in the sense that it's kind of copy and paste with a lot of guys on the recruiting trail for Florida as those high profile, high priority type guys. It's going to be some wait and see. There's obviously some noise in the system around Florida, status of the coaching staff. Guys have already wanted to kind of play wait and see as far as recruits on how things would go for Florida this season. So this is a chance to make an impression. It's a chance to show not only get some time around the coaching staff, but show that you're making that trajectory. You had that tough loss against Miami and in a blowout fashion. How are you going to rebound? How are you going to bounce back because there's more games to play this season? So there's a lot of things that I think that hinge on this visit going forward for where Florida's going to sit going forward in his recruitment, I guess.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that there may be some schools in here that we're not following too closely, because when you look at the bevy of opponents that Florida is going to play this season, teams like Texas A&M, obviously Florida State later in the season as well, LSU, Ole Miss, how Florida fares against some of those teams, those top, Power 4 teams that may be looking to even get in recruitments like this, I do think is going to play a determining factor in a lot of these recruitments here. He has interest in Texas, like you said, but where do the Aggies stand in his recruitment, making sure that Florida goes out and handles business on field and makes a positive impression against some of these other programs that may be in the mix, I do think is absolutely a priority. You mentioned that Miami game, and everyone saw the reactions on social media of what it looked like when the Gators frankly got embarrassed by the Canes, and there were prospects in the stands in Gainesville who were throwing up the U and supporting Miami, and what that can do to sway their decisions is certainly something that I think is kind of another level of intrigue with a lot of these recruitments here. So for Florida, obviously, they're going to look to handle business on the field, and how they look on Saturday will certainly, in my opinion, be a factor for someone like Hilson, who's going to have a ton of options and is going to make a decision here at some point in the future. You mentioned it's a fluid recruitment. Whether or not he takes it all the way to December, I think remains to be seen, but certainly making a positive impression just in the third week of the season is going to be a factor in my mind here. Now, he's not the only recruit that Florida is going to have on campus. Obviously, a couple other names there in the 2025 class. Who have you heard of that is going to be in Gainesville on Saturday for this mid-afternoon matchup that fans should be paying attention to, knowing that they're going to have a decision to make here in the next couple of months?
Yeah, I think I always have to give the disclaimer when you're putting together your visitor list is that it's expected. Expected is the key word there. Some names that I have now that a kid that has said he's going to visit, the plans can change. Rides have fallen through. I've had one time that a kid say that his car broke down on the way to Gainesville. So after he got it fixed, he turned around and went home. I don't know if there was any truth to that, but I mean, I've heard a lot of them. So there could even be some more additions for this visitor list. We'll obviously be on hand for the game on Saturday, spotting guys whenever they arrive. So we'll have a confirmed list of who's there present in the moment. So we'll see. I mean, I would urge people to keep an eye on Swamp247 as we continue to update the visitor list. But I think that from a 2025 aspect, I think a guy that's I guess worth noting. He's an unranked edge, and I know that. Probably you hear unranked, you're like, oh, wow. But it's a guy that his name is, sorry, I have to pull it up because he's that new of a name to me, Tim Griffin. He's out of the state of Georgia. Recently landed his first Power 4 offer this past weekend, but that offer came from Alabama. So he's a guy that is getting some attention from some schools now. Florida State is one team that I know he's planning to visit. He's planning to visit a couple of these Power 4 schools. So the interest is starting to pick up. It's kind of one of those deals to where as senior tape gets passed around, schools start to do their homework. They start to look into it, and there's always that one big offer that kind of opens up the floodgates, and then more offers could come, more interest can come. So I do know that Florida does like him. They are keeping an eye on him, so this will be a chance to get him there in person, maybe kind of size him up, get some measurements of the frame, just kind of just check every box. So maybe a potential offer for Florida this weekend in the 25 class, because I mentioned that edge position is a premier position for everybody. Florida has one guy already committed that may be listed as a defensive lineman on 24/7 Sports, but he's being recruited by them as an edge, and that's 4-star Jalen Wiggins out of the Tallahassee area. But the way Florida classifies their edge room, there's the F and then there's the Jack. So Wiggins is more of an F, which is a guy that's going to play that hand in the dirt, Tyreek Sapp, Justice Boone type of position. Whereas a guy like Hilson, who's Florida's target I spoke about earlier, he's more of a Jack type guy. He's going to be the TJ Searcy stand-up guy that's going to be able to play in some space, rush the passer, kind of do a little bit of everything. So it's an important position for Florida because Whereas the F position, you've seen how they've rotated a lot of guys, and they're trying to kind of test out different players and seeing what rotations work. They've got, I think, a solid foundation of guys at that F position. Whereas the Jack position, I think they're a little bit lighter. So that's why Hilson is such an important target. I don't know where Florida exactly views Griffin at this time. I really, and he's a new name to me. So edge position is an important spot. So Florida's got one priority guy in Hilson on campus this weekend, and then another guy in Griffin that we'll see where things go as far as where their recruitment goes in the next coming weeks leading up to the December signing day. But I think for the most part, as far as the confirmed names that I have right now, it's pretty heavily towards the 2026 class as far as targets. I think the wide receiver position is pretty deep. 4-star Sadarian Morgan, 4-star Jaden Petit, 4-star Samorian Wingo, and 3-star Jabori Riggins. Those are some guys right there that are all in-state wide receivers outside of Morgan. He's a guy from the state of Alabama, but he's one of the top wide receivers there. So wide receiver is a position that Florida has prioritized the last couple cycles. You've seen some of these guys committed now, some of the younger guys that they've added over the last couple cycles. So it's always a position they're trying to, kind of turn over and infuse talent. So I think the wide receiver position in that 2026 group expected in is pretty impressive. I would say that the defensive linemen, they have two guys, Elijah Golden and James Johnson, both 4-star guys in the 2026 class, both in-state guys that Florida has long offered. This is their second visits of the season. They both were at the Miami game, so a chance to get those guys on campus. But I think another area to where I said that the wide receiver group in the 26 class was pretty deep and pretty talented. I think on the other side of the ball, the linebacker position as far as visitors for 26 is pretty impressive. 4-star Malik Morris, 4-star Jordan Campbell, who is committed to Miami, 4-star Adam Belugan Ali. If I said his name wrong, I apologize, Adam. I'm still trying to figure that one out. And then I think a guy that could play some linebacker is 4-star safety Simeon Caldwell, but he's a guy that's got some size, so I think he could do a little bit of both, whether you can throw him in some safety spots, put him in some linebacker looks. So I think the deeper group, just because you're at that point in the cycle where 2025 targets outside of guys you're trying to flip, there's not a total big long list of uncommitted guys. So you're kind of trying to evaluate new targets there in the 2025 class. You're trying to flip some guys, and obviously you're trying to hold on to your commits that you have right now in the 25 class. So I think week to week, you're probably going to see a deeper list of 26 guys and even 27 guys, underclassmen types for these game day visits. But so those are some notable ones in 26. But I think even going back to 25, I mentioned how Florida's still trying to hold on to some of these 25 commits. Of the guys that are going to be in town this week and a handful of their commits for 2025 class, I think the one that sticks out the most to me is 3-star wide receiver Joshua Moore out of Pembroke Pines down in South Florida, West Broward. He's a typical X receiver. He's like 6'3", 6'4", 205, 210 type of guy. So Florida's wanted some size at that position. Josh Moore is a priority target, has been most of the cycle, still being recruited by Miami and Florida State. So it's a guy that, yes, he's committed to Florida, but Florida staff is still prioritizing him. I spoke with him earlier this week. He said that Billy Napier, Billy Gonzalez are in touch just about every day of the week. He talks with Coach Napier probably twice a week. Billy Gonzalez is doing most of the contact. So he was in town for the Miami game. Obviously, Miami is still recruiting him. They're probably the biggest threat to Florida right now. I mean, this is a guy that grew up in South Florida. His dad is like a lifelong Hurricanes fan. And while he does respect his son's decision, he knows this is like his son's first, adult decision to where he's going to make his choice for his life. So there's no pressure on him. But you've got a guy that grew up in a Miami household. Miami's playing well. He saw Miami beat Florida in Gainesville. So you want to keep showing him progress. You want to show him that not only is your team progressing, but your wide receivers are progressing. So it's a big chance for Florida to show him a win, show him some progress. He really liked what he saw from DJ Lagway in those clips against Samford. So a big part in his decision to commit to Florida, among a lot of things, but a big reason was DJ Lagway being there, being that quarterback of the future. Like, this is a guy that visited in the spring, like one of the spring practices for Florida, and comes out of that. And I'm like, what's one of the biggest things that impressed you from seeing the team? He's like, DJ Lagway, like, that guy is a general. And this was what he was saying about Lagway when, it's spring football before, hype continued to rise and before he had that big game against Samford. So he really likes DJ. So if you can show him however much DJ plays in this game against Texas A&M, if you can show him that, that freshman guy you got is still really good and he can still make a lot of plays, I think that's going to go a long way, as well as showing progress from your team overall and at wide receiver. So I think that of the commits, that's probably the biggest one I would think to note for this game.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's a factor that may be flying under the radar when it comes to the discussion regarding DJ Lagway and the sheer number of freshmen and sophomores that Florida is playing. I think you have to showcase to recruits out there and actually verify it that when you enroll at Florida, you're going to get an opportunity with this coaching staff to see the field early. You saw Aiden Mizell get the first touchdown of his UF career. Tank Hawkins, he was unavailable for that Miami game, but he gets out there against Samford, and his first reception is a touchdown for the Gators. And then obviously Lagway, that is such a appealing factor for Florida on the recruiting trail, because when you talk about the wide receiver position, that's someone that guys are going to want to come and play with. If he's able to create downfield explosive passes at a high rate within this Florida offense, which has been routinely discussed as one that hasn't been explosive, has, I think, kept guys from reaching their on-field production that they may desire to have early on in their careers here. Having a guy like that who can come in and take advantage of what the skill sets these underclassmen have and allow them to showcase what they can do, that is absolutely a massive recruiting factor for your team. And when you're in a place like Florida, I got to get your take on this as well before we wrap up this episode of the Swamp 247 podcast. I just think that where Florida's at from a recruiting standpoint right now, the most significant thing that they have working in their favor is going out there on the field and showcasing that the future is brighter than I think a lot of people think. You know, Billy Napier entered this year certainly under the hot seat where many people were expecting and predicting that with this bevy of opponents that Florida was going to face, with 11 Power 4 opponents, and having the team in a current situation where they're at, that Florida was going to struggle to convince talented blue chip prospects to buy in early until they went out there on the field and made people believe that this is a place that they could see a future for themselves, that there wasn't going to be a coaching staff change in the near future, that buying into a program early would pay dividends, that they would secure a spot and that Florida would turn things around. How important in your mind is that aspect right now for Florida? Not just going out there and competing and looking to get a win against Texas A&M, but showing that the freshmen and sophomores that you've added recently have a chance to be some of the leaders on this team. Because we covered a previous regime and Dan Mullen that kind of had the reputation that they were going to play veteran guys over younger players, even if the younger players gave them more of a chance to be competitive on the field. That, I think, certainly was something that was an intangible that hurt Florida's recruiting efforts. But now you have a coaching staff that has shown time and time again that they're going to put young players out there. And while many people are going to talk about how that speaks negatively about the health overall of the roster and the proven players that they have who are veterans, if you're a prospect looking to come in, Florida certainly offers you an opportunity to put something on film, showcase what you can do, and see the field early, which when you talk to these players time and time again, seeing the field early is one of the first things out of their mouths. Do you agree with the assessment that Florida, one of the best things that they can continue doing is not just be competitive, but to do it with younger players, whether it's Lagway, Tank Hawkins, Aiden Mizell, TJ Abrams, you name it, Jaden Baugh even. Do you think that that is a factor that Florida should prioritize here when it comes to aiding some of their recruiting efforts, just going out there and playing freshman guys that these prospects know, who maybe they're familiar with from playing with them at an in-state level? Do you think that that is certainly a significant factor here for Florida's recruiting efforts?
I think somewhat. I think whenever you've got, the Aid Mizells and just the Tank Hawkins, a lot of those guys you named, I think in general you want to play the best. And if those are the best guys, then that's what needs to happen. I think DJ Lagway is a different category than those guys. And I say that because if you're in a position where you need to show something, and I'm talking about from a staff standpoint, if you need to show progress, you need to show that, hey, I've got this thing on track. I'm going to be here. I'm going to be here for the time that you're in college, Mr. Recruit that I'm trying to recruit. That you have to show proof of concept. What is your proof of concept? And I think that is, and I don't mean it as a shot to Graham Mertz now, but these guys that are recruits, if you're a wide receiver guy, if you're an offensive recruit, whatever, you're going to have to build your team around your quarterback. And as Graham Mertz really doesn't factor into the the plan for these guys. These guys don't really care. That's the present. He's gone after this year. So what's your proof of concept for the future? Show me this guy that you've been telling me all offseason, because if you have the number one quarterback for the future that you just signed, it's kind of like your guy waiting in the wings. You're pitching to offensive linemen, running backs, wide receivers, whatever, all offseason that, hey, you've got a chance to play with this guy. That's kind of like your setting of what you're getting guys up on recruiting with. I think you've got to show, like, it's a different, like, you've got to make it a point to play DJ Lagway. Will playing an Aiden Mizell, or I guess trying to force those snaps in there if he's not ready. I don't know that those are going to be in the same category as trying to maybe force DJ Lagway into the game plan as much as you can, just because they're not going around saying, hey, you got a chance to play with Aiden Mizell. Hey, you've got a chance to play with LJ McCray on the defensive side of the ball. You can talk about all those great players that are in the future that are going to be in your supporting cast, but it seems like Florida's proof of concept when they're trying to sell the future is that you have a chance to play with a guy like DJ Lagway. Defensive side of the ball, I guess it's a chance to, play under the staff, be developed, show this, that, and the other. I don't know that they really have the same pitch as far as, a DJ Lagway. So I think that playing the young players is important because, yes, you can lean on that. Hey, we play young guys. We've done this in the past. We're doing this right now. But, that's not always going to be your team year to year. Florida doesn't seem to be in as much of a position to play those young guys this year as they were in previous years or even last year, where they did play, I believe, more freshmen than anybody in the country. So you can show that the best guys play. I don't have any favoritism. There's no negative towards that. But I feel like playing a DJ Lagway and trying to maybe force him into your game plan, where you can show these guys, from listening to recruits, especially wide receivers, they were wowed by what he showed. Guys like Vernell Brown, guys like Nashawn Montgomery, Florida's 2 tight end commits, and then even Josh Moore. Like, I just feel like that's just such a different sell to these guys, because you've got a guy that's come out and he broke a freshman record in his first start. I feel like that is just that's what you sold guys on, or what you pitched guys on all offseason. So if you can show that proof of concept for your future, hey, we've got a really good freshman quarterback. We've got a really good like veteran type of guy in Graham Mertz, but this is the future. This is the guy you're going to play with. You can see yourself fitting in this offense. Look at this guy stretching the field. If you find a wide receiver that doesn't like the big, long stretch plays, then they're probably not a wide receiver. I mean, especially guys that are like South Florida guys like Josh Moore, Nashawn Montgomery. Like, if you've been to 7-on-7 in the offseason, you see those South Florida teams, like, they're out there doing like the long ball. Everyone on the sidelines is chanting. Everyone's doing backflips. Like, the long ball is like live or die in South Florida. So that throw that you've seen DJ Lagway throw in Sanford, where he was stretching the field there, like, that has those South Florida guys that know they can stretch the field. They can take something short and go all the way, or they can go get over the top of the defense. Like, those are things that have guys excited because they heard all offseason, DJ Lagway's our future. DJ Lagway's going to do this. You have a chance to play with this guy. So I think if you can show these guys, like, hey, our future right now, we're showing things on track, but we've also got this really good guy that we told you guys all offseason, and him playing the way he is confirming what we've been saying. I think that that's the bigger pitch. I don't know that forcing any younger guy in there, I'm sure you can find all sorts of positives on there. But I just don't know that they really carry the same weight as what you can show these recruits, someone like a DJ Lagway, compared to some other positions. And that's just because the quarterback position is so polarizing. Like, I think that it's going to be apples to oranges if you're comparing DJ Lagway to any other position as far as what can wow or change recruits' perception of where you're at from a program now and what you can show them in the future with what you've got a guy so young, has all these years, and he's already playing like this now. If we get a couple guys like you and build some pieces around that, just think what this guy can do for you in the future and where you guys can elevate your games and the program in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you there. I do think that, DJ Lagway is just a different breed. And for the wide receivers, they were clearly impressed with him. That's a guy that you want to come out and play for. And not to, knock the veterans in any way, because I do think that they're important, because when you get to a program as a freshman going into your sophomore year, you're going to rely on those veterans in a lot of ways. I mean, you don't want to enter a program that doesn't have a strong leadership presence in the locker room. Maybe that's something that the younger players haven't stepped into just yet. And you need to know that when you get there, there's going to be players looking out for you who are willing to give advice. That certainly is what Billy Napier said regarding Graham Mertz. He said time and time again that Graham Mertz's return to Gainesville was the best thing for DJ Lagway's first year in Florida. And that was something that Lagway said on Saturday as well, that he's helped him tremendously since he got here. So they certainly do matter, but those freshmen, the underclassmen, absolutely, you need to showcase, and like you said, not force it certainly, but you need to showcase that if they are the best option there, that there's going to be no hesitance to play them. And I do think that Florida has done that the past couple of years, even if the on-field results have not been desirable. That's something that I think a lot of players can deal with, the improvement process for the overall team, if they're being able to play large roles. You look at Kelby Collins last year, TJ Searcy, they have shown time and time again at multiple positions on defense. Jason Marshall, I know it was during the Dan Mullen era, but he started as a freshman. You saw Jordan Castell step into a starting role from the jump last year over some veteran safeties in the room. They've shown at multiple positions that they're going to play young guys, and I do think that that is appealing. But obviously the on-field results matter, and Florida is going to look to secure a win over Texas A&M on Saturday, which will probably matter more than anything we just discussed regarding individual players. The Gators have to showcase improvement and show players out there and prospects that they are a team that is capable of contending in this brutal gauntlet of a 2024 schedule. As Blake said, the recruiting list could change at any time. He's going to be covering it all over at Swamp247 as players potentially get added or potentially drop off and maybe go elsewhere this weekend. So you're going to want to stay tuned, refresh that list in the next 24 hours before players start arriving in Gainesville, as they may tonight. We're recording this Friday morning here. So make sure you stay tuned to Swamp247, and we'll be covering everything else that you just mentioned, from DJ Lagway's performance to how the Gators fare against Texas A&M, how the run game looks, how Jaden Ball will look to bounce back after that fumble. A lot of stuff will be over at Swamp247 for the next couple of days and for the rest of the season. So if you're not a member, make sure you subscribe right now. But that's going to do it for us here at the Swamp247 podcast. We'll be back next week as well to discuss Florida's contest with Texas A&M. For Graham Hall and Blake Alderman, we'll see you next time.